Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we are continuing with Bhagavad Gita as it is. We are still in chapter number 13 and we'll recite verse 6 and 7 in Sanskrit and then the translation. Mahabhutani hankaro buddhir avyaktam evacha indriyani dashaikam cha pancha chendriya gocharaha ichha dveshah sukham dukham sanghataschetana etat kshetram samasena savikādharitam. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The five great elements, false ego, intelligence, the unmanifested, the 10 senses and the mind, the 5 sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life symptoms, and convictions. All these are considered in summary to be the field of activities and its interactions. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunanitanena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So as I mentioned last week also, this chapter is kind of technical, but it is good to know. Just like in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, we got the basic foundation, which is that we are not this body and we are the spirit soul. So same here is being continued, and Krishna is trying to explain to Arjuna what this body is made up of. It is a complicated subject matter, but Srila Prabhupada in his purport explains that we can get more knowledge about these elements in Srimad Bhagavatam, like you see the books at the back there. That's a summary of the Vedas, and we get more detailed information there, about the material elements and their interactions. But today's verse, we see that Krishna is talking about 5 great elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. So these are the 5 elements. They are total actually 24, but these are the 5 great elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Plus, along with that are the 5 knowledge acquiring senses. You see, we have senses, but they are different kinds. So 5 knowledge acquiring senses are the eyes, the ears, nose, tongue, and the skin. Then there are 5 working senses like the voice, the legs, hands, anus, and genitals. Then there are 5 objects of senses like smell, taste, form, touch, and sound. So in this verse today, 2 verses that we read, Krishna is also including false ego, intelligence, the unmanifested stage of the 3 modes of material nature, the mind. So all these together, these are 24 elements. And if we, make analytical study of these 24 elements, then we will understand the field of activity. Now, in the beginning of this chapter, we saw a question was asked that what is the field of activity? And Krishna says it is this body, which is the field of activity. And who is the knower? That's the spirit soul. And who's the knower of all the bodies? That is the super soul, which is the supreme personality of Godhead. So on top of this, Krishna says, on top of this, then there is desire, there's hatred, there's happiness, there's distress, and then these are all the interactions. So what is the purpose of understanding all this? Purpose is so that, first of all, we go beyond the bodily concept of life, not just keep thinking about body, I, me, mine, this body, how to satisfy this body, how to fulfill all the desires. That's also okay, but then we need to understand that we are not this body, but we are the spirit soul. So we try to focus on the spirit soul also. So that is why it is considered the basic understanding of the Bhagavad Gita. Now, the soul is present in the body. See, what's the difference between a living body and a dead body? The difference is the spirit soul. The moment the spirit soul leaves the body is considered dead. You know, there's a famous scientist, and he did some research and found out, Harry Monson, that's his name, Harry Monson, he found out that the value of the dead body, based on whatever chemicals are left in that dead body, is only $5.60. So imagine the value of the body when there is soul inside that body. And how do we know that there is a soul? It's the consciousness. We cannot see the spirit soul, but we can experience it with consciousness. That's the difference between a living body and a dead body. A living body is conscious, whereas the dead body is not. So what is happening is most people in this material world, they are kind of lost in the forest, you can say, you know, or you can say lost in material illusion. They are working under different modes like goodness, passion, ignorance, and most of them are identifying with the body, that I am this body, and that's the material conception. So what is the solution? How can we become happy? The reason we are not happy right now is because we are only thinking about the body. We are not focusing on the spirit soul. The soul is very, very important. As I mentioned, as soon as the soul leaves the body becomes useless. And this body is made up of all these material elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And that is the conditioning, you know, the material conditioning. We are taught right from our birth that we are this body. So we get conditioned. Now, what is the solution? The solution is to become free from this conditioning. You know, I had heard a story that there was this gentleman who used to, travel in the desert, and he had a camel, and he would do business, putting all load on the camel's back, and he would go from one place to another. So when he would take his camel, of course, the camel, there's a rope on the noose, and so he would pull the camel with that rope and bring the camel to the market to do some business. But before doing that, he would take the rope and he would tie it onto a pillar or a tree or something, and then would motion to the camel to sit down, and he would pull the rope and the camel would sit down. And then when his business was over, when it was time for him to leave, he would open the rope and he would loosen the rope so that the camel understands that it's time for him to, get on its fore and start walking. It so happened that one day his rope kind of broke. He didn't have another rope. And so the camel would not sit down. He would motion kind of talk to the camel to sit down, but the camel wouldn't do that. Why? Because the camel was conditioned by the pulling of the rope. So this man had an idea. He just tried to do the motion of pulling the rope, and that clicked onto the camel, and the camel sat down. And when he did the motion, there was no rope, but he just did the motion of loosening the rope, the camel just got up. That is conditioning. Of course, animals don't have philosophical intelligence to understand all this. They go by their just material conditioning. But we have intelligence, so we can use it as it is explained in this verse today, that this body is made up of these material elements. So how to remove this conditioning? The solution is that we do meditation. That is what Bhagavad Gita is teaching us in all the chapters, that we do mantra meditation on a daily basis. Because what happens When we do meditation, when we chant the holy names, the heart starts getting cleansed. The heart slowly becomes purified. And with that purification, then the consciousness also, the mirror of the consciousness becomes purified. Right now, most of us, our consciousness is covered, and that covering needs to be removed. Very nice analogies Krishna gives to Arjuna, that just like, the embryo is covered by the womb, right? The little embryo is inside the womb. Just like the mirror is covered up with dust. So we can't see our face because it's covered up with dust. Just like the fire is covered up by the smoke. Similarly, our conditioning is covering up our consciousness. So that dust needs to be removed. And that dust can be removed when we chant the holy names of the Lord. Now, in chapter 7 of the Bhagavad Gita, we heard about these material elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and how these elements, they create different bodies. You must have noticed that, our bodies are different from other bodies. Like we meet so many people in grocery store, while walking, at work, even amongst our relatives. We don't look alike. We have different features, different color, different size, different bodies. All these bodies, Krishna says, they are these material elements, they create these different bodies. Just like, for instance, this house. This house also is made up of material elements like wood, concrete, bricks, or whatever you may say. They are all put together. These material elements are put together, and then a house is built. Similarly, all these material elements, they come together and a different body is created. So we cannot say that we have created the body. No, we are just using the body that is given to us based on our past karma, based on whatever actions we have performed in the past. Based on that, we get a particular type of body in a particular family, in a particular country, or a state, or whatever it may be. So that is, all bodies are different, but they are all created by these material elements. So who is the creator of the material elements? It is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Everything belongs to him. We cannot say that, we cannot create the earth, the oceans, the rivers, the mountains. We cannot create anything. He is the creator. Everything belongs to him. We are just using it. Just like when we rent an apartment. When we rent an apartment, we don't own that apartment. We are just using that apartment. We've got it on lease. So similarly, this body also is given to us on lease for an X number of years, and we are just using this body. It doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the Supreme Lord. What is the illusion? The illusion is, I am the creator, I am the controller, I am the enjoyer. No, we are not, none of these. We can't even control old age. Is there anyone who can control growing old or getting diseased? Can anyone control death or birth? No, it's not possible. This is the cycle that keeps going on and on and on. We actually cannot even control the blinking of our eyes. We may try so hard, but we cannot control that. We don't even know how does the hair grow, how do the nails grow. We have no idea at all. So this whole earth is the creation of these 5 elements. This is what Krishna is explaining to Arjuna. And we, as his children, we are allowed to use this creation of his, but we cannot claim it to be our own. When we understand this difference between him being the controller and we being the controlled, then we will be able to come to a spiritual platform. You see, the senses, Krishna is talking about the senses in today's verse about the, knowledge acquiring senses, So when we have these senses, we need to use them properly. If we do not, then there's going to be trouble. In chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Yagnarthat karmanonyatra lokoyam karma bandhanaha tad artham karma kantaya mukta sangha samachara. That work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu, for Krishna, for the Supreme Lord has to be performed. Otherwise, work causes bondage. No one likes to be in bondage. Everyone wants to be free. So here is a process, how not to get entangled, how not to get into the cycle of birth, disease, old age, and death. We've been going on and on for many, many births, but an intelligent person understands and tries to break free of this entanglement and go to a place where there is permanent happiness. Now, today's 2 verses talked about Ichha Dvesh. It talks about the actions of the mind. The mind does the feeling and willing, So all this happens in the mind. And when, it is said that when we get a thought, sometimes or most of the times those thoughts, they change into words, and words, they lead into action. And that is how we get into the karma cycle, action and reaction, action and reaction. And this is what causes birth again. Just like, the chemists, the pharmacists, they know how to combine different medicines, right? Different elements, they know how to do that. So similarly, this body is a combination of different material elements. But important point to understand is that the soul is different from the body. In fact, chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, which is contents of the Gita summarized, Krishna explains to Arjuna in 22 verses. There are 22 verses in chapter 2, wherein Krishna tells Arjuna the difference between body and soul, talks about the qualities of the soul, that soul is ever existing, everlasting, it is primeval, it is, there is no birth or death for the spirit soul, there is no beginning and end to the soul, it is all ever existing. Why does he explain this to Arjuna? Because Arjuna is confused. He is there in the battlefield of Kurukshetra and he doesn't want to fight his relatives, even though he is a warrior, he's a soldier, it's his prescribed duty to fight, but he doesn't want to because he thinks when he kills the body, he's killing everything. No, Krishna explains to him that there's a difference between body and soul, that soul is ever existing, which means we are eternal. We do not die. It is just this body that faces death. Just like I'm wearing this green garment today. Once it gets old, I'm going to throw it away, but I'm not going to cry over it. Why? Because it's old and useless. And then I'm going to take on another garment. I'm going to wear another garment. Simple as that. And that is what the soul does. The soul gives up the old and useless body at the time of death and takes on another body. But an intelligent person would try to understand, why would I want to come back into another body? Because in this material world, according to the Bhagavad Gita, there are 7 kinds of miseries: birth, disease, old age, death, miseries caused by body and mind, miseries caused by other living entities, and miseries caused by material nature. So an intelligent person will think, let me come out of this cycle of misery and go to a place where there is no misery at all. And that is the spiritual world. So here we are understanding the combination of different material elements which make this material body, but the soul is different from the body. And we understand that this body undergoes 6 changes. 6 changes take place in the body. How? First, the body is born, the soul gets into the body is born, then it starts growing, from little baby to maybe a boyhood or girlhood or whatever, and then youth or whatever. And then it stays for some time, and then it has byproducts like having children or whatever. And then there's decay, which is old age, and then vanish, which means that is death. So these are the 6 changes that the body goes through. Of course, there are some, who die at a young age or whatever. But in general, people generally live up to old age. It is said that the average age is about 65. I don't know. That's what people say. And some say that in India, the average age is 80 years. So, but, it's different, but it's different for everybody. But the point to understand is that for one who is born, death is sure, and after death, one is sure to be born again. So it's important to understand that this body that we get at birth is made up of material elements. But the good thing is that along with this, especially the human form of body, we have philosophical intelligence by which we can differentiate, by which we can understand. Like, for instance, today we are trying to understand the Bhagavad Gita, which teaches us the purpose of human form of life, which is very, very rare. So this human form of life, if it is rare, we should not waste it. We should have a goal, especially a spiritual goal. It's just, one should not waste this human form trying to satisfy this body, trying to see what can I do to bring happiness to this body. Sure, we can do that, but at the same time, we should also have a goal for the spirit soul. Okay, I have this body and I also have a spirit soul. I am the spirit soul. So if I'm feeding this body, then I need to feed the spirit soul also. So there is a different food. For the body, of course, it's the food that we eat. But what is the food for the spirit soul? It is the mantra meditation. It is the spiritual knowledge. That is the food for the soul. So in fact, the Vedas, they start with this very famous verse, Athato Brahma Jigyasa, that one needs to inquire. Inquiring is very important. Inquire, what is the purpose of this human form of life? Who am I? Where have I come from? Why am I suffering? And how can I get rid of these sufferings? And what should be my destination? Where should I go? So when we inquire, then the desire to understand develops. You see, if there is no inquiry, then there's going to be no desire to understand. Then one will just lead a life or human form of life, eat, sleep, and be merry. That's about. There are 4 activities that a human does. Basically is eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. These are the 4 basic activities. Well, if we come to think of it, the animals also do the same thing: eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. So what is the difference between humans and us? The difference is that the Lord has given us that intelligence by which we can understand the purpose of human form of life. And this chapter, especially today's verses, are focusing on the material elements that make this material body: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. These are the 5 elements that come together to form this material body. But we should not forget the spirit soul, which is inside the body. That spirit soul which gives the consciousness to the body. You see, a very nice example I had heard that, here is, say, Mr. X, and the Mr. X has just, passed away, has died recently, and his body is right there, just before the funeral. And the wife is crying, Mrs. X is crying that Mr. X is gone away. Why is she crying? Because Mr. X, whom she thought that body was Mr. X, was still right there. But something within her tells her that no, there was something else within this body that has left this body. So that is why she cries that Mr. X has gone. You see? So we need to realize that while we are living, that there is a difference between me. My name is Gita. I am different. This body is different from me. That is Gita, which is the spirit soul within the heart. In chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, we understood that we have this gross body, and then we also have a subtle body. Now, this gross body is made of these material elements that we talked about today. But the subtle body is made up of mind, intelligence, and false ego. And Krishna explains to Arjuna that the subtle body, along with the spirit soul, which is our true identity, and the super soul, which is the Supreme Lord situated within us as Paramatma, super soul, they are all situated within the heart. That is why it is called the heart is the most important part of the body. Not many people understand what is the reason. They just think the heart is pumping out blood, so it's very important. Sure, it is. It's a part of the body. But there is the spirit soul, the super soul, and the subtle body within this body. You see? And what happens at the time of death? All these, the spirit soul, the super soul, and the subtle body, they leave this material body and they go on to the next material body. Now, I see the important point to understand is that the Supreme Lord is with us all the time. He goes with us from one body to another, to another, to another, since time immemorial. How very compassionate of him. Why is he there? To guide us, to help us, to witness our activities, and to help us so that we can come out of this conditioning of I am this body. People generally think I am this body. No, we are not this body. Our true identity is that we are the spirit soul. So another important point is that when the subtle body goes on to the next body along with the soul and super soul, the same mind, the same intelligence, the same false ego goes on to continue on in the next body. Have you noticed that there are twins, born in a family? Sometimes both of them are totally different. Why? Because they have come along with their mind, intelligence, and false ego. They have come along with their consciousness or with their thought process. Everything has come into the next body. So Bhagavad Gita is teaching us how we can purify our consciousness so that we come out of this conditioning of I am this body. And this will be possible when we start inquiring. We start inquiring, why am I not permanently happy? Why is it that happiness has a beginning and an end? Why do I get distressed? Why do I suffer? So when we start inquiring, then there will be a desire to look for answers. And Bhagavad Gita is considered to be the owner's manual for this human form of body, which teaches us how the mirror of our consciousness can be purified. And the best way is to do mantra meditation. Mantra, man means mind, and tra means to free the mind. So mantra actually frees our mind, of all anxieties that we may have. So that is why, especially in this age, which is called the Kali Yuga, the easiest process given to us is chanting the holy names of the Lord. It is said in the scriptures, Krite yadhyayato Vishnu, Tretayam yajatomake, dwapare paricharyam, kalau tad hari kirtanam. That there are 4 ages: Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapar Yuga, and Kali Yuga. So there is a different process of self-realization for each age, for each yuga. Yuga means age. In Satya Yuga, people used to become self-realized by meditation. In that age, people live for 100,000 years, and to become self-realized through the process of meditation, one should meditate for at least 30,000 years. Only then one can become self-realized, come out of this conditioning of the bodily concept of life. Then came Treta Yuga. In that yuga, people lived for 10,000 years. And the process for self-realization was fire sacrifice. Then was Dwapar Yuga. It is said that people live for 1,000 years. And the process for self-realization was elaborate worship in the temples. But this is Kali Yuga. This is the age of Kali Yuga. In this, it is said, Kalau tad hari kirtana. Tad means one gets the same benefit of meditation, fire sacrifice, elaborate worship, just by hari kirtana, just by chanting the holy names of Krishna. This is very simple process. Why? Because in this age, very rarely do we hear people live more than 100 years. So we have a very short span of life. And in that, we cannot become self-realized by meditation or fire sacrifice or elaborate worship. The easiest process is by chanting the mantra, the Maha Mantra. Actually, it is called the Maha Mantra, which means it has the potency of all the mantras given in all the Vedic scriptures. It is composed together to make it into a very small mantra, which is called the Maha Mantra. I'm going to post it here on the chat, the mantra, which is very, very simple. And we will chant also for a little while, just to give you an example on how to chant this mantra on a daily basis. So at the bottom, you will see there is mantra given at the bottom. So I'll just chant for a few minutes so that we can try to purify the mirror of our consciousness. So these are the chanting beads. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So you see, I just chanted 10 times, but if we chant 108 times, that takes about 10 minutes. That really helps us to purify our mind, to purify our senses, to purify our consciousness. So this is the summary of today's verse that we took up today.